We're going to have a conversation here. So I just want to kind of continue what we kind of started yesterday.
Sure.
And go into the issue of how things are changing and what it means. So I'm just going to start off here. Hi, this is Lou Covey. This is Com Basics and a conversation with Kevin Morris from Tech Focus Media. And we started a conversation in text a couple of weeks ago about some changes that are happening in the industry, and I wanted to continue with this discussion on the lines, without talking about who's doing what, but just the essence of how the industry is changing.
Sure.
And Kevin, you've taken a position that it's not time to give up on the old ways of doing things.
I have.
And I'm taking the position that, maybe it is. Yesterday, an article popped up that I found in the International Journal of Communication. Okay, and this was written by the program manager of VPRO Television in the Netherlands, Michael Parks and Manuel Castells, who are on the faculty of the Annenberg Center in the University of Southern California.
Okay.
And they came up with a couple of interesting things here. In this paper they wrote about the future of journalism. They said that we are less concerned with the survival of traditional business models of journalism than with the continued and improved performance of journalism in the public interest. And then they end up describing journalism as it should be done today as to observe the relevant facts and ask good questions to the right people, understand the observations and answers in context, and explain these findings well to others in the global network society. Okay? And they summarize them as data collection, interpretation, and storytelling.
I would agree with those things.
Good. So, but the question is how are these going to be funded? And what they're saying is that there's a lot of different ways things are being funded. For example, Al Jazeera is funded by the Qatar royal family.
Sure.
Oh, excuse me, Qatar royal family. That's the right pronunciation. Taxpayers fund the BBC in the UK. There are various other forms of sponsorship, advertising. There's all different kinds of ways to fund it.
Absolutely. And there have been for a long time, right? It's not new that there are different ways to fund it.
Yeah. So how those things are funded affect the ethics of journalism?
Well, ethics is a tricky slope, and one of the things they said in the article you just quoted was that it's important to try to decouple the concept of journalism from the business model that supports it. Mm-hmm. To me, the thing that's gotten blurred a lot recently is there are these two concepts. There's journalism and there's marketing, and the difference to me in those is sort of who the person generating the content is representing, who they are the advocate for. And to me, a marketer is a person that's creating content on behalf of some entity, a corporation, a government, or whatever, and they're trying to promote some message and get some message out. And I'm not saying there's anything negative about this message. They can be really useful and important information. But a marketer is trying to get some message out to the public that's on behalf of the entities that they're representing.
Right.
And to me, a journalist is representing the audience. And what they're trying to do is collect and interpret information that will be the most useful to their audience. And they are actually an advocate for the audience. And I think both of those roles are really important. Marketing people need to be putting out information into the world and trying to achieve whatever agendas they are. And journalists need to be putting their stuff out in order, sort of as audience advocates. And that's a matter, right, of trust with the audience. Does your audience know who you are? Do they trust you? And do they believe that you're being objective and that you don't have some ulterior motive to what you're doing?
Well, the thing is, though, because I agree with you basically on both of those premises. But the thing is, from my understanding of the journalism ethics, and I go back a long way, all the way back
Sure.
to when we first wrote the darn thing in 1973. Journalists are supposed to act independently and in the statement of ethics as possible. Okay? Mm-hmm. So they can't actually be acting as an advocate for the audience. They actually have to be somebody who's sitting in between. They have to be a Switzerland. Because
right.
The audience has one set of priorities in their life, and the corporation or the marketer has another set of priorities. The goal of the journalist is to be as a go-between at that and be able to balance them out in the proper perspective, to provide a perspective different from either the audience or the marketer.
I don't know that I see them as a go-between in that they should represent both interests.
No, they shouldn't represent both interests. They should be able to find an entirely different perspective than those two. And here's my
Agreed,
point.
yes.
Here's my point, in fact. Okay, and this is why we at Foot.Media concentrate on issues in the content we create, not products and services. Okay, in that the people who are in a corporation who are marketing, they have a basic frame of reference. And basically that frame of reference is we got to sell products.
Right, sell our stuff.
We got to sell our stuff. And they truly, truly believe that what they've got is the best possible stuff there is. Okay? The audience is in there going through things like the tech-focused media stuff and the Foot.Media stuff, and they've got a problem. They've got an issue to resolve. Okay? And they don't necessarily care about the product or the features and benefits of individual products. They only care about their issue. Okay? But everything they get is about products and services, and they've got to be the ones to slog through it. The journalist is supposed to be able to come in and say, okay, we've taken a look at products and features of multiple different products, and that's all great, but here's the real issue, and we don't find any particular product that actually does that. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's what the actual story should be. Or they should discover something altogether different. Like we've just finished a series that we're going to be coming out with about reducing the cost of semiconductors. Okay? And after I interviewed Gary Smith and semiconductor companies and design service providers, essentially we hit a wall as to how much it would cost to develop a new processor.
As many people do, yes.
Okay? and the statement is that yes, you can reduce all of this stuff. I mean, essentially, for $10,000, you can get all the tools and all the services you need to create a new semiconductor. But your NRE costs are still going to be this to get it all the way to design. Well, the thing is, in this process, I discovered a little company that has actually figured out a way to collapse the NRE cost by 50%. And they're working with a couple of large semiconductor manufacturers.
Okay.
And nobody knows about this. But this essentially brings the cost of developing a semiconductor down below $5 million all the way to mask. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's what a journalist is supposed to do.
Well, to me, that's what a good marketer should do. A good marketer should be mapping solutions to people's problems.
That's true. But how many good marketers are there out there?
Actually, not that many. I mean, we're here at a trade show today, and I've spent probably every hour on the hour hearing marketing pitches from a different company. Mm-hmm. And some of them are very good at it, but that's a very few. Some of them will talk about, here's the problem that our customer is having, and here is how we have a solution to that problem, which is sort of what you were just describing with bringing down the NRE on semiconductor design. And a lot of them are, here's our product and the 25 features that it has and why they're 10% better than the competitors, which I kind of think is bad marketing.
Yeah.
And but to me, those are all different kinds of marketing. And I think that some kinds of marketing are best done by a journalist, but I don't think that makes that kind of marketing be journalism. Journalism to me is completely made up of, and we might be arguing semantics on definition.
Yeah.
Journalism to me is representing the audience's interests without regard and almost with a little bit of disdain for any commercial interests that are happening. And I think that the areas that comes into conflict are competition and omission. If there are two companies that both claim that they can reduce my NRE on IC design by 95%, then which one of them am I going to choose to give the message of, and how do I select that?
Right.
And if I'm a journalist, first I need to be skeptical about both of them. They need to prove to me that they can actually deliver on what they're doing.
Right.
And I need to try to, with whatever expertise I have, hopefully, evaluate those two claims based on what I think the needs of my audience are, and I need to give my opinion. Well, I feel like these guys are doing a better job than these guys, or I think these guys have strengths here and weaknesses there. And that's where I feel sort of what you do talk about in terms of weaknesses, flaws, and competitive comparison are the elements of journalism that are typically not there in marketing, or at least not in an unbiased way in marketing.
Right. So to take that into context, on the story that I just told you about, okay, it was sponsored by one of the companies that gets quoted. Okay, but what the company says doesn't has any that's being quoted in the article has nothing to do with their particular product. They're only talking about the issue of NRE. Okay?
Right.
And in fact, what this guy is saying about this new company could actually have a negative impact on the sponsor services. Okay, and they know this, but they're willing to sponsor the article because it makes people talk about the issue. Okay, not about their product or service, but about the issue. Okay, and that's where it comes into the part where you're saying, well, you've got two companies that are essentially the same. Okay, and yes, you can make a value judgment personally about which you think is better between one or the other, but in reality, what they say about themselves are exactly the same.
Sure.
Okay, so
Company A says we can do A, B, and C. Company B says we can do A, B, and C.
So in that case, when you've got two people that say exactly the same thing, but one is willing to sponsor the content over the other, and you're willing to, and they're willing to be identified as being the sponsor of it, so it's complete transparency. Okay, why can't that be considered journalism?
I think ethically there needs to be transparency in terms of who's sponsoring anything.
Right.
I said at the beginning, I believe there's journalism on one side, I believe there's marketing on the other side. I think they're both important. I think marketing masquerading as journalism starts to push the line of ethics, and that's when there's not full disclosure about sponsorship or,
But that's why at that particular moment, that kind of information could never come out of a marketing department. Even though, as you said, a good marketer should do that.
I think it could, and I think it does. I think it comes out of a smart marketing department.
Yeah, it could, and that's kind of what I'm trying to say here is that as the media shrinks, I mean, you're an anomaly. Tech-focused media is an anomaly in that you are doing well. Okay, other media companies all over the world, except possibly in the third world, are failing miserably. Okay,
I think. Well, yeah, I agree that lots of media companies are failing. I think the problem is that there has been sort of the collapse of the print-based distribution model and the rise of electronic media. And I think a lot of people assumed that because the print business model is no longer viable, that the traditional model of journalism was similarly not viable. And I think those are different and separate things. I think, you say that with the e-journal we're an anomaly, and that's because from the beginning, 10 years ago, we started the company to be an online but traditional journalism-based company. And our philosophy was we want to have objective, independent content that has nothing to do with who sponsors us. We want to write stuff that our audience of engineers wants to read. And then because of that, we hopefully build a large audience of loyal readers. And so we have those two things, audience and credibility. And then that's what we have to sell to people like potential advertisers, separately on the other side of the house. It's a really hard line to walk, but it's not about whether you're distributing based on print and whether you've got 1,000 employees or 10 employees, which is one of the key factors in whether you can do an online publication as a business efficiently and economically and actually make a profit. We've seen a lot of print-based media outlets die. I think a lot of that was their failure to properly adapt and make the move from print to online. I think a lot of them thought at the same time, that means the traditional journalism model doesn't work either. We have to go to all sponsored content or pay-for-play, and I think that's not necessarily true.
But beyond that, isn't it possible, because you've already said that a good marketing company can produce credible content.
Sure.
That's a benefit.
Absolutely.
That's essentially what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I think lots of marketing content is really valuable, really credible, and really important. I think that it has a limit in the kinds of information that it can give the audience. You will find very few companies that will pay for an article that says, well, we really blew it with that last product. It wasn't very well accepted in the market, and it had these big flaws in it, and it was kind of lousy compared to what the other guys were doing. And I think that's an important thing that independent journalism brings. We will tell the audience that. And at the same time, how do you keep a firewall between that and the commercial interests? A lot of times it's the same sponsors that are paying for the advertising that are actually funding your operation that do that. So you have to maintain this firewall. It's not easy, but it's never been easy. That's always, in the history of journalism, that's always been the struggle.
Do you see the process between quote-unquote traditional journalism and, let's use the term marketing journalism?
Sure.
Okay. Do you see a level of collaboration involved there? Because that's another thing these guys are talking about in this paper, is that collaboration on content is becoming possibly more important than it ever has been before.
I think collaboration on information gathering has always been important. I want marketers to talk to me. I want to hear their entire story, top to bottom, front to back, every detail as much as I can. If it's something that I'm interested in and I'm going after, I want to write an article about topic X. Okay, then I need to go out and find all the companies that are doing topic X. I need to try to hook up through their PR people. I want to talk to their marketing people. And I want to find out, I want to hear their best pitch and what they think. I want to talk to their customers and see what they think. I want to apply my own judgment to that, and then I want to write something. So that's nothing but collaboration, really.
Okay.
I have to understand what sources I can trust and can't trust, and I have to make judgments about what I think is and isn't the truth. If I do a good job of that, my audience over time will find me to be credible. If I do a bad job, they'll lose faith in me, and my value will, go away. So I try really hard to do a good job of that.
All right.
But I think I have nothing. It's completely fueled by collaboration.
Cool. All right. That's a little bit more than I wanted to do, but what can we say? It was good stuff.
I really enjoyed it, Louis.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Sure. And check back again, because I think we're going to be going on with this for some time. So thanks for listening.